There are films that arrive not just as entertainment, but as cultural phenomena. Pieces of art that step into a world already carrying with them the weight of a million expectations, voices, and memories. And that is what happened with Minecraft, the movie 2025. I want to welcome you, my fellow explorers of story and symbol, my companions who love not only the rush of cinema, but also its echoes, how it hums in our lives after the screen goes dark. Here at Cinema Vault, we don't just consume movies. We converse with them. We listen for the layers buried beneath their images. We treat them as literature spoken in light and sound. And tonight, I want you to join me in peeling back one of the most unusual and fascinating adaptations of our time. But before we dig deeper, let me make something clear. This is not a conventional review. I'm not here to tell you whether a scene was funny enough or whether the effects looked sharp enough. This is something different, an intellectual meditation dressed in the warmth of personal storytelling. A conversation for those of us who grew up on novels, myths, poems, and who now find in cinema another kind of text to read. If that resonates with you, I invite you gently to subscribe, not because I need the numbers, but because we're building a hive of minds here, literature lovers who want to read cinema as though it were Homer or Dostoevsky. Now about this film. The first thing to acknowledge is that it is not starting from scratch. For more than a decade, Minecraft has not just been a game, but a cultural language. For some, it was a childhood landscape, pixelated forests, endless mines, little blocky sheep. For others, it was a community, a place to build, to experiment, to dream in cubic geometry. When I walked into the theater, I carried all of that with me, and I suspect you did too. That's what made the film so daunting for its creators. It wasn't adapting just a story. It was adapting a world people had already lived in. What fascinated me almost immediately was how the movie chose to embrace simplicity. It didn't try to smooth out the blocky edges, didn't try to overcomplicate the aesthetic. It leaned into the very thing that made the game iconic, a world that feels childlike and primitive, yet beneath it, infinite. And as I watched, I realized that this was not just a stylistic choice. It was a philosophical one. The blocks themselves became a metaphor for storytelling. Every narrative is made of blocks, scenes, characters, choices. And just as players build meaning out of cubes, so too does the filmmaker build meaning out of images. The plot teases itself slowly. There's no need to go into full detail yet. We'll save that for later. But the opening images give us a sense of both innocence and danger, creation and destruction. We see not just a world built, but a world threatened. And this tension between building and breaking is the heartbeat of the story. I couldn't help but think of myths I've read, stories of gods who shaped the world only to see it undone by forces of chaos. Here, told through pixel and frame, we find the same eternal theme. What moved me most, though, was the way the film invited reflection on community. In the game, no one builds alone for long. We build with others in servers, in villages, in shared imagination. The movie understood this. Its characters are not just lone heroes, but part of something larger, part of a hive. Their struggles reflect not just personal survival, but the survival of community. Watching this, I thought of our own world, how fragile our hives are, how easily they're threatened by exploitation, corruption, indifference. And I realized this film is not about blocks or monsters. It is about us, about our fragile societies, about the eternal work of building and rebuilding. For me, that is why the movie resonated so strongly. It took something many feared would be hollow, a game adaptation, and turned it into allegory. It whispered truths about responsibility, about creativity, about destruction and rebirth. And in doing so, it reminded us that stories, whether carved in stone or coded in pixels, always circle back to the same truths. So tonight, as we embark on this analysis together, let's treat this not as a review, but as a shared meditation. We'll walk through the story, the characters, the symbols, the techniques. We'll ask not, was this entertaining? But what does this mean? What does this say about us, about our lives, about our hives? And as we move deeper, scene by scene, I invite you to listen for the hum beneath the blocks, the symbolic vibration that tells us this is not just a movie, but a fable about creation, community, and the cost of defending them. The story begins with simplicity, as if it wants to remind us that creation itself often starts with the smallest spark. The opening images show a vast and blocky horizon, fields of green cubes, forests made of straight-edged trees, rivers that flow like strips of glass. It is familiar to anyone who has ever picked up the game, but here, on the big screen, it feels mythic. This is not just a landscape. It is a world waiting to be shaped. The camera lingers on the quiet, on the innocence of a place not yet torn by conflict. And into this quiet, the film places its characters, wanderers, builders, seekers, each carrying within them the same question we carry. What does it mean to build in a world where destruction is always waiting? Our entry into the story is through a protagonist who feels at once ordinary and archetypal. He is not a warrior when we meet him. He is a builder, a dreamer, someone more fascinated by crafting a simple shelter than by fighting monsters. This choice is deliberate. The film wants us to see creation before we see destruction. Watching him place block after block, shaping something out of nothing, I felt a deep resonance. It reminded me of how myths often begin not with battles, but with creation stories. The act of building is holy in itself. But of course, as in all creation myths, darkness lurks at the edges. Soon, we are introduced to the fragility of this piece. Night falls, and when it comes to creatures, creepers, skeletons, the pixelated monsters that anyone who has touched a game knows all too well. Their arrival is not just a threat to survival. It is a symbol of entropy, of how quickly the order of a day can unravel. The first encounters are tense, filled with dread, but what matters most is what they teach the characters. No structure is safe forever. Walls can fall, fires can spread, hives can be broken, and yet, even as danger presses in, the instinct is not simply to run but to rebuild, to adapt, to keep shaping meaning out of blocks. This is where the film begins to open its heart. The protagonist encounters others, wanderers, villagers, builders of different kinds. At first, they are cautious of one another, strangers unsure whether to trust. But slowly, necessity draws them together. A small band forms, not because they sought each other, but because survival in such a world demands it. I was struck by how natural this felt, how it mirrored real life. Communities are often born not out of grand vision, but out of shared need. And as they build together, their trust grows. The hive begins to take shape. The film lingers on the beauty of collaboration. We see them splitting tasks, one mining for resources, another crafting tools, another defending their small camp at night. The rhythm of their work feels almost musical, a symphony of labor. Watching them, I realized the film was teaching us something. Creation is never solitary. Even the most private builder eventually builds for others, with others, or against the chaos that threatens them all. And in this, the story mirrors literature itself. Writing, like building, is often solitary, but its meaning is communal. But as with all stories, peace does not last. The first great disruption arrives in the form of loss. Their small camp, lovingly crafted, is destroyed in a sudden explosion. A creeper infiltrating when vigilance faltered for just a moment. The blast reduces days of work to rubble, scattering them, leaving them shaken. I felt a pang watching this, not just because of the spectacle, but because of what it symbolized. How often in our own lives do we spend years building something, a home, a family, a dream, only to see it undone in a single night by forces beyond our control? That moment reminded me that fragility is part of the human story, and the film dares to place it front and center. It is after this destruction that the larger conflict reveals itself. The characters begin to suspect that the monsters of the night are not random but organized, guided by a darker intelligence. Whispers spread of a force hidden deeper in the world, a presence that threatens not just their small camp but the entire land. For the first time, their story shifts from survival to purpose. They are no longer just building for themselves. They are building to resist something greater. This shift elevates the film from personal to mythic. It is no longer just about homes and tools. It is about destiny. The first half of the story culminates in discovery. The group stumbles upon ancient ruins, structures left by those who came before, builders long gone, whose works now stand in shadow. Carvings hint at battles fought, hives destroyed, worlds rebuilt. Here, the characters realize that they are part of a cycle much larger than themselves. What they face is not new, it is eternal. Creation and destruction are locked in an endless rhythm, and their role is simply the next verse in the song. The ruins themselves become a mirror, showing them what will happen if they fail, but also what can endure if they succeed. By the time this first movement closes, the characters are no longer wanderers. They are a fellowship, a hive bound not just by necessity, but by shared purpose. Their innocence has been fractured, their trust tested, their vision expanded. They know now that the darkness will not leave them alone, that peace is not given but defended. And so they begin to prepare not just shelters, but fortresses, not just tools, but weapons. Yet even as they harden, the film never lets us forget that their true mission is not destruction but preservation. They fight not for conquest but for the right to build, to dream, to create without fear. When the first half closes, we feel both weight and anticipation. Weight because we've seen how fragile the hive is, how easily it can be broken. Anticipation because we know the greater darkness still waits. And in their determination to face it, I saw something that felt less like cinema and more like allegory. They were not just characters on a screen. They were us, in our fragile world, building hives of families and communities, guarding them against the creeping corruption that always comes at night. The journey forward begins not in triumph but in uncertainty. After the ruins reveal the history of battles long forgotten, the group walks into the second half of their story burdened with knowledge. They are no longer innocent wanderers, testing their strength against the night. They are inheritors of an old war, inheritors of responsibility. And with that knowledge comes weight, the kind of weight that bends shoulders and darkens eyes. Their building changes. Where once they built with joy, huts, farms, small homes filled with warmth, now they build with calculation. Towers rise, fortresses take shape, defenses bristle with sharpened edges. The blocks are the same, but the spirit is different. I found myself thinking of how human beings transform under threat. A city built in times of peace has windows wide open to the sun. The same city, rebuilt after attack, is walled, gated, suspicious. What the film shows us is that creation shaped by fear is never the same as creation shaped by joy. It is still survival, but survival heavy with the knowledge that destruction is inevitable. The darkness grows more intelligent as they advance. No longer do monsters stumble randomly across their paths. Instead, attacks come with uncanny timing, as though guided by an unseen hand. The film reveals its greater antagonist here, the Ender Menace, a figure who embodies the chaos that has haunted their nights. The Ender world, whispered in lore and hinted at in ruins, begins to surface as the source of their suffering. It is not just creepers or skeletons they fight. It is order itself unraveling, orchestrated by a mind that feeds on entropy. The group fractures under pressure. Fear and grief splinter them. One member argues that fighting is pointless, that the cycle cannot be broken. Another insists that retreat is the only way. For the first time, voices rise in anger rather than in harmony. Their hive trembles. And as I watched them argue, I realized that this too was part of the allegory. Communities do not only collapse when attacked from outside, they collapse when the bonds within are frayed. Survival requires not just walls and weapons, but trust. And trust is harder to build than any fortress. The turning point arrives in the form of loss. A night raid overwhelms their defenses, and one of their numbers is taken, not killed, but dragged into the darkness, toward the portal that leads to the end. This event shakes them to the core. For the protagonist, it is a moment of clarity. Retreat, safety, isolation, none of these are possible anymore. To save their friend and their hive, they must face the darkness at its source. The ruins hinted at it. The monsters confirm it. The end is waiting and it must be confronted. And so the story pushes them toward the inevitable descent. Together, they craft what they need. Eyes of Ender, tools forged in fire, weapons sharpened for a battle that feels less like survival and more like destiny. Their preparation scenes are not rushed. They are ritual. Every block placed, every tool shaped, feels like a prayer. I thought of epics where warriors prepare for their final stand, where the mundane act of sharpening a blade is given sacred weight. Here, in pixel and light, the same myth unfolds. The entry into the end is breathtaking. Gone are the bright greens and golden skies of the overworld. Here, everything is stark, alien, an obsidian wasteland dotted with towers, lit only by the void. The silence is unnerving. No birds, no bees, no hum of life. Only emptiness. The characters, dwarfed by the expanse, look almost childlike against the scale of it. It is here that the allegory reaches its sharpest edge. They have stepped not just into another dimension, but into the heart of entropy itself. The battle with the Ender Dragon is staged not just as spectacle, but as metaphor. The dragon circles endlessly, swooping, striking, impossible to pin down. It represents a chaos that always returns, the force that cannot be destroyed completely, but must always be resisted. Each character fights not just with weapons, but with conviction. Their teamwork, once fractured, becomes their salvation. They realize that no single strike will save them. Only unity can. I thought of how myths across cultures give us monsters not to be slain easily, but to be endured, resisted, faced again and again. The Ender Dragon is such a monster. It is chaos made flesh. When victory finally comes, it is not triumphant. The dragon collapses, dissolving into fragments of light. But the silence afterward feels heavy. They know it will return someday. The cycle is not broken. It is only delayed. And yet, in this moment, balance is restored. The kidnapped friend is saved. The hive stands together once more, and the overworld breathes again. It is not a permanent peace, but it is enough. Enough to rebuild, enough to live, enough to hope. The return to their world is quiet. They walk out the portal not as the same people who entered, but as scarred, wiser versions of themselves. The protagonist, who once built huts for shelter, now builds homes with reverence. He understands now that every block places defiance, every wall raised is an act of love. Every creation is resistance against entropy. The hive is fragile, but it is worth protecting. The film closes where it began, with blocks placed carefully, with bees buzzing softly in the air, with life reshaping itself after loss. But the meaning is different now. We know the darkness waits. We know the hive will be threatened again. But we also know that creation, no matter how fragile, always rises again. And in that cycle, there is hope. What lingers in me long after the film ends are not just the blocky landscapes or the monumental Ender Dragon, but the people who move through those spaces. The builders, the dreamers, the skeptics, the villains. Each of them felt like more than a role in the story. They were archetypes, embodiment of qualities that belong not only to characters in fiction, but to all of us in the hives of our real lives. The protagonist, introduced as an ordinary builder, anchors the story in humility. When we first meet him, he is not extraordinary. He has no powers, no armor, no legend attached to his name. What defines him instead is his instinct to create, to place one block upon another, to transform emptiness into shelter. That ordinariness is what makes him so profound. He is not mythic by nature. He becomes mythic by choice. As destruction tears away his innocence, as loss forces his hand, he steps into responsibility not because he wanted it, but because it was demanded. In him, I saw a mirror of countless reluctant heroes, from Odysseus to Frodo, figures who never sought glory but accepted burden because someone had to. His silence at times, his gaze that lingers on the structures he builds, makes him feel less like a warrior and more like a guardian of meaning. Among his companions, each carries a symbolic weight. There is a warrior who thrives in conflict, who measures strength not in structures built, but in enemies defeated. His confidence is inspiring but also dangerous, for it tempts a group to see violence as the only solution. Yet in his loyalty, we glimpse something essential, the necessity of courage, of confrontation. When darkness cannot be reasoned with, he is both blade and shield, and though his path often diverges from the builders, their partnership becomes the heart of the hive. Then there is the skeptic, the voice who doubts whether the fight can ever be won. At first, this figure frustrates, always questioning, always hesitating. But I found myself grateful for them, because doubt is as essential to survival as courage. Without the skeptic, groups rush blindly into ruin. With them, plans are tested, weaknesses exposed, vulnerabilities acknowledged. The skeptic embodies caution, and though they must eventually choose trust over fear, their doubts sharpen the hive's resilience. In their hesitation, I saw the part of all of us that questions whether it's worth fighting, whether the hive can endure. The kidnapped friend, who becomes a catalyst for the group's final mission, embodies innocence. Their abduction into the end is not just a plot device, but a symbol of what is always at stake. Those who cannot defend themselves, those who pay the price when systems collapse. Saving them becomes more than rescue. It becomes redemption. Their vulnerability reminds the group, and us, that the purpose of guardianship is not conquest but protection. The villagers, those who live quietly at the margins of the story, fascinated me. They are not heroes, not warriors, not leaders. They farm, they trade, they sleep, yet their very existence is why the struggle matters. They represent the hive in its purest form, ordinary lives worth defending. Too often in epics, the background people are forgotten, but here they matter because they're the foundation. In their simple daily cycles, they are the meaning of justice. And then, of course, there is the Ender Menace, the great antagonist embodied in the dragon and its servants. What makes it terrifying is not just its strength, but its philosophy. It does not destroy for survival. It destroys for the sake of undoing. It is entropy given form, a reminder that chaos is always hungrier than creation. The dragon circles endlessly, swooping, striking, refusing to be pinned down. Like the chaos in our own lives, the crises that never arrive at convenient times, the losses that blindside us. It is not just a monster. It is a symbol of inevitability. And by facing it, the characters face more than an enemy. They face the truth that order must always defend itself again and again. What struck me most is how the group itself is a character, the hive. They begin as scattered individuals, uncertain whether to trust. They argue, fracture, rebuild trust, learn to work in harmony. By the end, they are no longer a collection of wanderers, but a single organism, buzzing with shared purpose. Their arc is as important as any individual's, the journey from isolation to community. In that arc lies the film's philosophy. Survival is never solitary. To endure, one must be part of a hive. Looking at these characters critically, I realize they are less individuals and more mirrors of aspects within us. The builder is our creative impulse. The warrior is our courage. The skeptic is our fear. The innocent is our vulnerability. The villagers are our ordinariness. And the dragon is our entropy, our chaos, our inevitability of collapse. Together, they form not just a story but psychology, a map of the human condition disguised in pixels and blocks. And that is why, for me, the characters of Minecraft, the movie endure. They are simple, yes, drawn with broad strokes. But simplicity here is not weakness. It is universality. They remind us that beneath all our complexities, we are still hives of builders, warriors, skeptics, innocents, ordinary folk, and guardians standing against the dark. The story gives them form, but life gives them meaning. And when the credits roll, we carry them not as pixels, but as parts of ourselves, buzzing quietly, reminding us of who we are and who we might yet become. What makes a movie about blocks and pixels feel alive is not just the script or the actors, but the strange alchemy of accidents, choices, and unexpected truths behind the camera. Minecraft, the movie was never going to be ordinary. How could it be, when its source was the most open-ended, player-driven game in history? And yet, the path from concept to screen was filled with detours and oddities that almost feel like myths themselves, the kind of stories people will tell years later, the kind of stories that make the movie feel less manufactured and more born. One of the strangest facts is just how many times this movie nearly didn't exist. Development began way back in the mid-2010s, passing to the hands of multiple directors and writers. At one point, the studio wanted a straight children's comedy, light and silly, nothing more than slapstick with blocky visuals. At another point, there was a draft that imagined a post-apocalyptic Minecraft world, bleak and dystopian. Jason Momoa was attached to star in earlier versions before the direction shifted entirely. The fact that the film finally came together in 2025 feels almost miraculous, like a tower in Minecraft itself. It was torn down and rebuilt over and over until one vision finally stood tall. Another curiosity lies in the decision to embrace the blocky aesthetic rather than smooth it out. Early concept art tried to imagine realistic versions of creepers and villagers, but test audiences hated it. It was uncanny, unsettling. It didn't feel like Minecraft anymore. So the filmmakers took the bold choice to lean into the cubic look, to make a world that felt faithful to the game rather than Hollywood polished. Ironically, what executives once feared looked cheap became the very thing that made the movie unique. It taught them a lesson. Authenticity can be stranger and more compelling than realism. Then there's the matter of sound. The famous oof and thunk sound of Minecraft have become iconic, almost comedic. At first, the audio team wanted to replace them with cinematic effects, realistic thuds, deep Hollywood booms. But test screenings felt wrong. The sound were too polished, too serious. So the filmmakers went back and layered in authentic Minecraft noises. The clink of mining, the hiss of a creeper, the plop of placing a block. Critics later called this childish, but audiences loved it. Hearing those familiar sounds in a theater full of strangers felt like a secret language shared. One of the strangest production stories came from the actors themselves. Many of them admitted in interviews that they had never played Minecraft before signing on. To prepare, the cast was enrolled in a Minecraft boot camp. For 2 weeks, they played the game together on a shared server, building, mining, and surviving. Apparently, the director even encouraged him to stay in character during gameplay. The actor playing the skeptic constantly warning about dangers, the one playing the warrior charging into fights, the builder quietly placing block after block. By the end of camp, their in-game base had become a microcosm of the film itself. Half-finished towers, hidden mines, walls built and destroyed. The production designer even borrowed details from that server when designing sets. So in a way, the cast built part of the movie themselves block by block. Another odd fact is how the Ender Dragon battle was designed. The visual effects team struggled for months to decide how smooth or blocky the dragon should be. Too blocky, and it looked silly. Too smooth, and it stopped feeling like Minecraft. The final design was a hybrid. Angular wings, pixel edges, but animated with weight and grace. To capture its movement, the team studied the flight of real birds of prey and even built a giant cube rig puppet to test lighting and shadows. Imagine it, a massive cardboard dragon flapping in the studio, casting angular shadows on the walls, while technicians debated whether its tail should be 4 blocks long or 5. There are also whispers about cameos hidden in the film. Some crew members hinted that Marcus Persson, the original creator of Minecraft, known as Notch, appears as a villager in the background of a village scene. The cameo has never been officially confirmed, but fans swear they spotted his likeness in pixel form, trading carrots in a quiet corner. Whether true or myth, it feels fitting. The creator hidden in the world he once built. During production, bees caused more chaos than anyone expected. Inspired by the popularity of bees and Minecraft updates, the filmmakers decided to include real beehives on set to capture reference footage. But bees, as Jason Statham himself knew from The Beekeeper, have their own will. During outdoor shoots, swarms wandered into camera rigs, lights, and even the actors' costumes. One actor joked that half their scenes were filmed while trying not to flinch from the buzzing under their collars. In the final film, digital bees dominate, but hidden within the sound mix are real bee recordings from those chaotic days. Perhaps the strangest fact of all is how the movie was received during early test screenings. Studio executives expected only children and families to connect. Instead, they found adults, especially those who had grown up with Minecraft in the 2010s, tearing up during key moments. One screening reportedly ended with a 30-year-old man thanking the filmmakers because it felt like my childhood was given dignity. That wasn't expected. For a movie based on blocks, it struck chords of nostalgia, belonging, and fragility far deeper than intended. And finally, there's a marketing oddity. When the first trailer dropped, fans noticed that the YouTube-like button had turned into a pixelated block for a week, just for that video. It was a tiny detail, easily missed, but it showed how even the digital world outside the theater became part of the hive. When I gather all these strange facts, I realize that Minecraft, the movie, wasn't simply produced, it was wrestled into existence. It was a film that had to survive false starts, abandoned drafts, uncanny designs, be invasions, and skeptical audiences. Like a structure in the game itself, it It was built, destroyed, and rebuilt until it stood firm. And that strangeness, that unpredictability, is what makes it so alive. It isn't just a polished adaptation. It is a hive of accidents, myths, and odd decisions buzzing together into something unforgettable. The first event that demands reflection is the destruction of Eloise's camp. No, not Eloise here, but the fragile first base that our builders create. In the language of the film, it is just a hut, a furnace, a chest of supplies. In the language of cinema, it is Eden. The moment it falls to a creeper blast is more than spectacle. It is an allegory for how easily human labor is undone by forces beyond control. Days of building, seconds of ruin. From a critical perspective, this is not just about monsters. It is about fragility. It is about how every human endeavor, homes, families, systems, stands vulnerable to sudden collapse. The explosion is not just sound and fury. It is a symbol of entropy, of the truth that in this world, destruction is always quicker than creation. The next critical event is the discovery of community. When the protagonist first joins with others, the story shifts from survival to fellowship. This is no small transition. In myth and literature, the lone wanderer often becomes legend, but here, the film insists on togetherness. It critiques the fantasy of the lone hero by showing that survival is only possible when a hive gathers. They're building together, they're mining together, they're shared defenses. All of these moments are arguments for community as the true source of strength. Critics might see it as sentimental, but I found it profoundly honest, because in truth, no hive survives without collaboration. A third event worth pausing on is the encounter with ruins, structures left behind by those who came before. From a plot perspective, it deepens lore. From a symbolic perspective, it does something more powerful. It reminds us that we are not the first, that every struggle we face has been faced before, that every hive has its history of collapse and rebirth. These ruins are less backdrop and more mirror. They tell the characters and us that the cycle of creation and destruction is endless. This is not a new battle. It is the same battle, retold in blocks, as old as human history. The abduction of the friend is another crucial moment. It personalizes the stakes. But beyond that, it embodies what is always at risk in the fight between order and chaos. The vulnerable. The friend becomes symbol of innocence carried away. The price communities pay when predators strike. The mission to rescue them is not just rescue. It is allegory for why we build, why we fight. It is never for glory. It is always for the ones who cannot defend themselves. Then comes the great crossing into the end. Critics often dismiss this as spectacle. CG towers, void landscapes, dragons. But from a critical perspective, it is descent into myth. Every epic has its underworld, its abyss. Odysseus descends to Hades, Dante into hell, Frodo into Mordor. The end is that abyss, stripped of color, stripped of warmth, a realm of entropy itself. Entering it is not just narrative necessity. It is archetype fulfilled. It tells us the truth every culture has whispered. To save the hive, we must face the void. The confrontation with the Ender Dragon crystallizes the allegory. The dragon is not just an enemy. It is chaos given form, entropy given wings. It circles endlessly, as chaos always does, never resting, never finished. To fight, it is to fight inevitability itself. The builders strike, defend, rebuild towers as they are shattered. Fight not for conquest, but for survival of order. The dragon cannot be killed once and for all. It can only be resisted, delayed, held at bay. This is the deepest truth of the film. Entropy never ends. We fight not to win permanently, but to preserve temporarily, to buy time for the hive to thrive. Finally, there is a return. After all the chaos, the builders come back to their world, scarred but alive. They build again. They place blocks again. The cycle resumes. Critics might call this anticlimax, but I found it honest. Life does not end in triumph. Life ends in continuation. The hive rebuilds, not because the darkness is gone, but because the work is never done. In this final act, the film critiques the Hollywood obsession with permanent victory. Instead, it offers something truer, fragile endurance, rebirth without forgetting loss. From a critical perspective, these events form a tapestry. The destroyed hut is fragility. The fellowship is community. The ruins are history. The abduction is innocence at risk. The end is the abyss. The dragon is chaos. The return is resilience. Each event, seen in this light, is not just a plot point but a parable. Together, they tell us what literature has always told us, that life is fragile, community is essential, chaos is eternal, and creation is our defiance against it. And that, I think, is why the movie resonates beyond its genre. Beneath the blocky visuals and digital monsters, it is telling the oldest story we know, the story of hives threatened, of guardians rising, of cycles endured, the story of us. The making of Minecraft, the movie was itself like a survival game, full of setbacks, strange detours, unexpected allies, and strokes of luck that felt like rare treasures mined in the dark. The film might look polished on the screen, but the journey to bring it there was anything but smooth. In many ways, the production mirrored the very story it was trying to tell. Blocks laid down, torn apart, rebuilt again, until a structure finally stood tall enough to be called finished. The first thing to know is just how long this film wandered in development. The idea of a Minecraft movie floated around Hollywood for over a decade. Directors came and went. Screenplays were written, scrapped, and rewritten again. At one point, there was nearly an animated musical version. At another, a darker PG-13 adaptation that imagined Minecraft as a dystopia. Every attempt collapsed like a half-built tower toppled by a creeper. It wasn't until the final team stepped in, bringing a willingness to embrace the blocky absurdity rather than run from it, that the film finally solidified. That in itself is a fun fact. The movie survived its own cycle of creation and destruction, like a structure in a game rebuilt endlessly until it finally endured. Once filming began, authenticity became the unexpected obsession. The filmmakers could have easily used generic CGI, smoothing out the jagged textures, polishing the characters into something sleek. But the creative team insisted. The world had to look blocky, awkward, unapologetically Minecraft. This decision terrified executives. They feared audiences would laugh. But on set, the designers leaned into it, studying the game frame by frame, mapping how shadows fall on cubes, how light scatters through pixelated water. Every block you see in the movie was modeled with painstaking care to mimic the in-game physics. Ironically, what once seemed too silly became the film's greatest strength. The cast itself had an unusual preparation. Most of them had never played Minecraft before. To fix that, the director organized what the crew called Minecraft Boot Camp. For 2 weeks, the actors played together on a shared server. They mined, farmed, fought monsters, argued about what to build, laughed when creepers blew up their creations. By the end, their server looked eerily like the early scenes of the film. A haphazard camp, half broken, half beautiful, marked by both cooperation and chaos. The production designer actually borrowed screenshots from this boot camp when designing the sets. So in a sense, the actors literally built parts of the movie themselves. Not all fun facts were charming. Some were chaotic. During motion capture sessions for the Ender Dragon, the team used a massive cube rig puppet to simulate lighting and scale. On one occasion, the rig collapsed mid-take, scattering black cardboard wings across the studio. Crew members joked that they had been attacked by a dragon made of IKEA parts. That joke stuck, and for weeks, people called the prop the IKEA Dragon. Even though the action was stressful, it gave the team a sense of levity, a reminder that filmmaking, like Minecraft, is equal parts frustration and play. Sound design brought its own surprises. Everyone knows the iconic noises of Minecraft, the crunch of gravel, the hiss of creepers, the thunk of placing a block. The audio team at first considered replacing them with cinematic equivalents, but the director fought to keep the original sounds woven into the mix. They recorded new layers on top of them, like slowing a creeper's hiss until it sounded like a deep industrial drone. The result is a hybrid, authentic game audio blended with cinematic weight. A strange fact is that the hum you hear in the background of some scenes isn't digital at all. It's actual recordings of bees slowed down, stitched into the score, blending nature and machine. One of the quirkiest behind-the-scenes details involves Marcus Notch Person, Minecraft's creator. He wasn't officially part of the film, but crew members claim he visited the set briefly and filmed a cameo as a villager. Whether true or just myth, fans swear they spotted his likeness trading in a background shot. If real, it's a ghost of the creator walking among his own creation, like a silent god stepping into the hive. Filming locations added their own texture. Though much of the film was CGI, some landscapes were shot in deserts and forests for reference. Actors in motion capture suits were placed in these natural settings so animators could study how real sunlight hit bodies, how dust swirled in the air, how trees swayed. The irony of people dressed in pixelated suits walking through real landscapes became a running gag on set. Drivers passing by would slow down to stare at what looked like blocky aliens wandering the countryside. The editing process was as grueling as a night spent mining in survival mode. Early cuts of the film ran too long, with entire subplots about ancient builders and lost civilizations. These were trimmed heavily to keep the story focused. But whispers remain that somewhere in the studio vaults lies a longer, more lore-heavy version of the movie, one that leaned even harder into mythology. Fans may never see it, but knowing it exists adds a sense of mystery, like a hidden chest buried on the floorboards of film. Perhaps the most heartwarming production insight comes from the dynamic between the younger cast members. Several of them had grown up playing Minecraft and admitted that being in the movie felt like stepping inside their childhoods. Between takes, they often sat together building in creative mode on their laptops. One day, they constructed a sprawling castle during lunch break, and the VFX team secretly modeled part of it into a background shot. That means a tiny slice of the movie actually came from a structure the actors built off camera for fun. It's a reminder that the spirit of Minecraft, play, collaboration, imagination, was alive not just in the script, but in the cast themselves. Looking at all these stories together, what I find most striking is how the production itself became a hive. There were stings, collapsed rigs, endless rewrites, chaotic shoots. There was honey, moments of laughter, castles built at lunch, sounds discovered by accident. There was discipline, patience, sacrifice. The making of the movie wasn't smooth, but like a hive, it survived its storms to create something sweet. And that perhaps is the greatest fun fact of all, that the film about building and rebuilding was itself built and rebuilt, block by block, until it became the structure we now see. What makes this film unforgettable is not only what happens in it, but where it happens. The world of Minecraft is a paradox. Simple, blocky, childlike, and yet infinite, mythic, deeply symbolic. Translating that world into cinema could have gone wrong in so many ways. It could have become parody, or worse, lifeless imitation. But what struck me as I watched was how carefully the filmmakers treated setting not as backdrop, but as character. Every landscape, every cube of light and shadow, seemed to pulse with meaning. The first setting we see is the overworld, rolling green fields, square trees, pixelated rivers. It is instantly familiar, but on the big screen it becomes something more. The camera lingers on its stillness, its innocence. It feels like Eden, not yet touched by corruption. There is a humility in those visuals, the reminder that all great myths begin in simplicity. The blocky sun rises over the horizon not as a scientific orb, but as a symbol. Light arriving to bless the builders before darkness comes. Watching it, I realize that this film's landscapes speak in the language of archetypes. They are not realistic. They are essential. When night falls, the setting transforms. Shadows flatten. The world becomes eerily quiet, and then out of the silence, movement. Creepers lurking, skeletons rattling, the hiss of the Enderman. The world is the same, but it feels entirely different. This duality, peace by day, terror by night, reminded me of old folk tales, with a forest by morning a sanctuary, but by dusk it becomes haunted. The film uses setting to remind us that context is everything. The same tree, the same hut, the same road, all are innocent until darkness redefines them. The call center villagers, more modern, more built-up, carries its own weight. The camera here is tighter, the lighting harsh, the colors more sterile. It doesn't feel like creation, but exploitation. Rows of blocks stacked into walls, lines too perfect, light too cold. It is a false hive, buzzing not with life, but with theft. What fascinated me is how the filmmakers made even blocky pixels feel morally loaded. A wall can look nurturing or predatory, depending on how it is lit, how it hums with purpose. The ruins are perhaps the most haunting setting. Half-buried temples, crumbling strongholds, moss-covered stone. Their presence tells us, without words, that others came before, that the cycle of building and breaking is eternal. These ruins feel almost literary, like the half-remembered ruins in Tolkien or the desert monuments in Greek myth. When the characters enter them, the silence is heavier. Even the soundtrack slows, echoing with a suggestion that history itself watches. I thought about how every civilization leaves ruins, and how those ruins are both warnings and invitations. They whisper, "You are not the first to build, nor will you be the last of all." And then there is the end. If the overworld is Eden, the end is abyss. Its palette is drained, its landscape alien. Obsidian towers rising like teeth against the void. There is no water, no sky, no hum of life. Only silence, broken by the flapping of wings and the hiss of Endermen. The geometry here is sharper, harsher, as if the blocks themselves have become hostile. Watching it, I felt that familiar unease one feels in ancient myths when the hero descends into the underworld. This is not just another setting. It is the place where entropy lives, where chaos is a body. The end is not designed for comfort. It is designed to strip away illusions. Cinematography makes these settings more than decoration. The camera often frames the world from low angles, making blocky towers look monumental, making even a simple hut seem sacred. Wide shots emphasize the loneliness of builders against vast landscapes, while close-ups on crafting tables and torches remind us that meaning lies in the smallest details. Light, too, is wielded as narrative. The warm glow of torches and furnaces stands against the cold darkness of night. Sunlight feels like grace. Moonlight feels like trial. The hum of bees, layered into the soundscape, turns natural spaces into sanctuaries. Even the textures of sound play into setting. Listen closely, and you'll hear the crunch of gravel, the hollow plop of footsteps on wood, the echo of caves. These aren't just noises. They are tactile reminders of presence. They make us feel as though we too are stepping into that blocky world, touching its walls, fearing its shadows. Critics sometimes scoff at how silly Minecraft looks, but on screen, paired with sound, it becomes more real than realism, because realism tries to imitate life, while symbolism tries to embody truth. And here, truth wins. What struck me most is how the film uses setting to echo theme. The farmhouse in the beginning is fragile paradise. The call center is a false hive. The ruins are memory. The end is entropy. Each space tells us what we are supposed to feel, what truth we are supposed to carry. The characters don't just move through landscapes. They move through symbols. They walk through meaning. And in doing so, they remind us that our own settings, our homes, our cities, our ruins, are never neutral either. They too carry echoes, shadows, whispers of what we build and what we destroy. By the time the story returns to the overworld, after the Ender Dragon falls, the setting is changed, or rather, we are. The same field stretch, the same sun rises, the same blocks form walls. But we can no longer see them with innocence. We know now that darkness lurks, that entropy waits. And yet, we also know that creation continues, that blocks will be placed again, that the hive endures. The landscape has become less innocent, but more sacred. It is no longer Eden. It is survival, and survival, too, is holy. In the end, what makes the settings and cinematic elements of Minecraft, the movie unforgettable, is not their polish, but their purpose. They remind us that space shapes meaning, that every block placed is an act of storytelling, that even the simplest cube can carry myth if you light it with care. And as I watched the final sunrise spread across the blocky world, I realized this. The film had taken a game of infinite possibilities and turned it into a fable about fragility, community, and endurance. The world itself became a character, humming with symbols. And that hum, like the buzz of bees, will stay with me long after the screen goes dark. The strangest thing about Minecraft, the movie, is how much of production mirrored the game itself. In the game, you begin with nothing, just blocks, tools you craft, mistakes that force you to start again. The movie was built the same way. For nearly a decade it lived in survival mode, passing through studios, abandoned drafts, and shifting visions. At times, the project looked like it had collapsed entirely, like a ruined base after a creeper explosion. And yet, somehow, block by block, it was rebuilt until finally, in 2025, it stood. By the time cameras rolled, the filmmakers had already learned one hard truth. You cannot make a Minecraft movie by running from its blocky awkwardness. Earlier drafts tried to smooth out the cubes, designing realistic trees, rounded faces, monsters with more Hollywood menace. Test footage horrified audiences. It looked uncanny, like Minecraft stripped of its soul. The breakthrough came when the creative team embraced the very thing executives feared, the blockiness itself. Sets, props, and even motion capture rigs were designed to echo those jagged cubes. What once looked like a weakness became the film's defining aesthetic. On set, this choice created endless challenges. Actors wore block-inspired mocap suits with rigid edges that limited how they moved. At first they stumbled, awkward and stiff. But then something magical happened. The limitations gave the performances authenticity. The blockiness wasn't faked. It was lived. When you see a character walking with a slight stiffness in the film, it's not just animation. It's the actor embodying the geometry of the world. Crew members joked that by the end of filming, everyone moved like villagers, heads turning at sharp angles, gestures clipped like pixel animations. There's also the story of Minecraft Boot Camp, a preparation ritual unlike anything most actors had experienced. Because many cast members had never played the game, the director set up a shared server and told them to survive together for 2 weeks. They built, mined, argued, starved, rebuilt, laughed. One actor became obsessed with farming, another with mining deep into caves, another with hunting mobs at night. What's remarkable is how their personalities in the game bled into their roles in the film. The builder stayed patient, careful, reflective. The warrior grew reckless and bold. The skeptic wanted to quit more than once, warning that they'd never last. Those dynamics became the backbone of the story. And when the film recreated their server structures, it was less design than memory. Chaos followed, as it always does. During motion capture for the Ender Dragon, the team built a massive cube-frame puppet to simulate lighting. One day it collapsed mid-take, scattering cardboard wings across the studio. Crew members nicknamed it the IKEA Dragon and swore it looked scarier falling apart than it ever did on screen. Another time, during a desert shoot for environmental reference, the mocap actors overheated in their rigid suits and had to be cool with water hoses, looking like pixelated mannequins being watered like crops. Sound presented its own trials. Everyone knew the Minecraft noises, the crunch of gravel, the hiss of a creeper, the metallic clink of tools. The first sound passes replaced these with polished Hollywood effects. It sounded wrong, sterile. Only when the team mixed in authentic in-game sounds. Sometimes layered with slowed recordings of bees or distant industrial hums. Did the world come alive? In one case, the hiss you hear before a creeper explosion in the movie is actually the slowed-down sound of soda fizzing, recorded in a kitchen during late-night desperation. Editing the film was described by one insider as like chiseling a statue out of a mountain of blocks. The first cut was sprawling, 3 hours long, full of lore about ancient builders and myths of the end. It fascinated some test audiences, but confused others. In the end, huge sections were cut, but whispers remained that a longer, stranger mythic cut exists somewhere in studio archives, like a hidden stronghold beneath the surface of the official movie. Fans speculate about it online, as if it were treasure waiting to be unearthed. There were also moments of strange tenderness. Between takes, younger cast members who had grown up with Minecraft would pull out laptops and start building in creative mode. One lunch break, they constructed a sprawling, pixelated castle together, joking that it was better than the sets. The VFX team, touched by their enthusiasm, secretly modeled part of that castle into the background of a later scene. That means tucked away in the final cut of the movie is a structure built not by designers, but by actors at play. It's a hidden relic of joy, encoded into the film. Marketing carried its own quirks. For 1 week after first trailer dropped, the YouTube-like button turned into a little blocky cube for that video alone. Fans noticed instantly, treating it like an Easter egg. For days, social media buzzed not about the trailer itself, but about the Minecraft button. Small gestures like that made the movie feel like more than a film. It felt like an event where digital culture and cinematic culture collided. And then there were the bees. Inspired by Minecraft Beloved Bee Update, the filmmakers wanted authenticity. Real hives were brought in for reference shots. What no one expected was how often the bees would hijack production. They swarmed lights, invaded sound rigs, even landed on actors' blocky suits. One day, filming had to stop entirely because bees nested in the equipment truck. Instead of panicking, the director decided to record the buzzing. That very sound, captured in chaos, became part of the end soundscape in the finished movie. The bees, in a sense, became part of the cast. What all of this reveals is that the making of Minecraft, the movie was itself a survival story. Actors adapting to stiff suits, crews improvising when dragons collapsed, sound designers turning soda fizz into danger, bees rewriting production schedules. Every day was like playing the game, resource gathering, improvising tools, rebuilding after disaster. And like the game, the joy was in perfection but in persistence. When I think of these behind-the-scenes tales, I realize that the spirit of Minecraft was alive not only in the story but in the hive of people who made it. They built, lost, rebuilt, laughed, argued, endured. And from that chaos came something that, like the game itself, feels less like a product and more like a world you can step into. The film is blocky, yes, but behind each block is a story, a human hand, a little accident turned into art. The first and most enduring theme is creation itself. At its heart, Minecraft has always been a game about building, about placing blocks against a void, about shaping meaning out of nothing. The film honors that philosophy. Every time we watch the characters construct huts, towers, farms, and fortresses, it is more than survival. It is a ritual of defiance. Against the night, against the monsters, against entropy itself, they build. From a symbolic lens, this is humanity's oldest story. We are creatures who make. From the first clay pots to the pyramids to digital servers, our instinct has always been to leave marks on the world. The film's blocks are not just cubes of stone and wood. They are metaphors for every act of creation in a fragile universe. Opposing creation is a theme of destruction, faster, hungrier, always lurking. The creeper explosion that reduces days of work to rubble is not just a jump scare. It is an allegory for the fragility of all human labor. One moment of negligence, one spark of chaos, and entire structures fall. This duality between creation and destruction drives the film, but also whispers something truer. Creation is meaningful because it is fragile. If nothing could fall, nothing we built would matter. The fragility of blocks makes their placement sacred. Another profound theme is community. The film could have told the story of a lone builder, a solitary figure mastering the world. But instead, it insists that no hive survives alone. We see trust forged around campfires, tools traded, defenses built side by side. The fellowship that emerges is the true protagonist, a hive made of individuals. Symbolically, this is a counterargument to the myth of the lone hero. Survival is communal, not solitary. The villagers, who seem background at first, embody this truth most simply. They farm, they trade, they sleep. They are ordinary, but they are the reason the guardians fight. The hive matters more than the warrior. The ruins deepen the symbolic current. Crumbling temples and moss-covered strongholds remind us that others came before. They built, they fought, they fell. Their stones are warnings and promises. Nothing lasts, but everything echoes. In literature, ruins always hum with this paradox, reminders of mortality, but also continuity. The ruins in Minecraft. The movies say, "You are not the first hive, and you will not be the last." Creation and destruction cycle eternally, and your place is one verse in an endless song. Then there is the theme of guardianship. The protagonist begins as a builder, reluctant to fight, longing only for peace. But peace is shattered, and he learns that the hive demands guardians. This tension between solitude and responsibility is central. To live only for oneself is to abandon the hive. To rise for others is to sacrifice peace for burden. Symbolically, this is the eternal weight of leadership, of parenthood, of any act of guardianship in life. The beekeeper we discuss in another story is echoed here. Guardians are rarely volunteers. They are chosen by necessity, their stillness broken by loss. The end itself is pure allegory. It is not just another level. It is the abyss, the underworld, the realm of entropy stripped bare. Its obsidian towers and endless void symbolize the chaos that underlies creation. To enter it is to confront the truth that darkness is not outside us, but part of the cycle. The Ender Dragon, circling endlessly, is the embodiment of inevitability. Chaos that cannot be slain forever, only resisted again and again. This, I think, is the film's most honest statement. There is no final victory. There is only vigilance. The friend's abduction into the end sharpens another theme, innocence at risk. Every community is judged not by how it treats the strong, but by how it protects the vulnerable. The rescue mission is more than plot. It is philosophy. Creation and guardianship mean nothing if they do not serve those who cannot defend themselves. In the friend's return, fragile and trembling, the hive remembers its true purpose. Even silence becomes symbolic in this story. The protagonist speaks little, building more than he explains. In contrast, villains and scammers chatter endlessly. Scripted words, empty promises. This contrast critiques our world, where language is too often used to exploit, while truth is found in quiet acts of care. Silence in the film becomes dignity. Noise becomes deceit. The hum of bees, wordless, steady, is the film's truest language. Light, too, is a symbol. Torches glowing in caves, furnaces flickering in huts, sunrise breaking over plains. Light here is not just illumination, but grace. Fragile, flickering, always threatened by shadows. The fact that torches can be extinguished makes them sacred. Each small flame is a metaphor for hope, for resilience, for meaning in a world eager to swallow us in dark. And finally, there's a cycle. The story ends not with conquest, but with rebuilding. The hive returns to the overworld. The blocks are the same, the sun the same, the hum of life the same. Yet everything is changed. They have seen the abyss, lost innocence, fought chaos. The cycle continues. Build, break, build again. And in that cycle is the deepest theme, resilience. We do not build because it will last. We build because it matters that we do. That is a hum at the heart of the movie. Creation, destruction, community, guardianship, fragility, resilience. Blocks stacked into parables. Pixels turned into myths. And as I left the theater, I realized that the film had done something extraordinary. It had turned a game into allegory, a pastime into philosophy. It had whispered truths as old as ruins, as enduring as hives. We are builders, we are guardians, we are fragile, and we endure. What fascinated me about Minecraft? The movie is how its filmmaking techniques leaned into limitation, rather than fleeing from it. Most game adaptations try to outgrow their source, smoothing what is jagged, polishing what is crude. This film made the opposite choice. It kept the cubes. It kept the stiffness. And in doing so, it found authenticity. The camera was not ashamed of blockiness. It celebrated it. Wide shots lingered on horizons where the sun was a perfect square, where rivers ran like strips of blue glass. The cinematography framed this not as parody, but as myth. What some fear would look childish instead looked eternal. Like cave paintings reimagined in pixels, the editing carried the same philosophy of clarity. Where many modern action films drown us in fast cuts and frantic angles, here the sequences were deliberate, each strike of a sword or swing of a pickaxe clear and heavy. When the creeper explodes, we see the devastation in one sweeping shot. So the fragility of creation registers fully. In quieter moments, the edits linger on a rhythm of placing blocks, of torches flickering into caves, as if the film itself wanted us to meditate on the holiness of small acts. The contrast between chaos and clarity was not accidental. It was the language of the story. Chaos cut quickly. Order lingered long. Sound design may be the most ingenious technique of all. The filmmakers wove the iconic noises of the game into a cinematic score, layering clinks, hisses, and thuds with orchestral swells. A pickaxe strike would echo not just as sound, but as rhythm. The hiss of a creeper was stretched, deepened, turned into an ominous drone beneath a fight scene. And at the center of it all was a hum. Bees slowed and bent into something like a choir. That hum was everywhere. In caves, in ruins, in the end itself. It became the heartbeat of the film, uniting sound and symbolism. For me, it was a reminder that sometimes the smallest sound, if treated with care, can carry the most meaning. Lighting became moral language. In the overworld, light was warm and golden. Torches glowed like grace, filling blocky huts with intimacy. At night, shadows stretched too far, and the smallest flicker felt fragile. In the end, lighting was stripped almost bare, harsh, sterile, unforgiving. The obsidian towers cast no warmth, only menace. Critics often underestimate lighting, but here it was philosophy. Light stood for community, for hope for the hive. Shadows stood for entropy. And the fact that light was always fragile, always one extinguished torch away from collapse, made it holy. The fight choreography, limited by blockiness, became almost ritualistic. Characters moved stiffly, deliberately, like figures in a mythic dance. It was less about acrobatics than about weight, about the meaning of each strike. When the Ender Dragon fell, it was not a flurry of chaos, but a slow, inevitable collapse, a beast unraveling into light. The technique reinforced the symbolism. Violence is not spectacle, but necessity, ritual, purification. And then there is the story of the box office. Many predicted disaster. For years, game adaptations had carried the curse of mediocrity. Minecraft, with its blocky visuals, looked impossible to translate. Some expected a minor family hit. Quickly forgotten, instead, the film became one of 2025's great surprises. Opening weekends overflowed with nostalgia. Young adults who had grown up mining and crafting. Parents who had watched their children build worlds in pixels. It wasn't just kids filling theaters. It was generations. The numbers told their own myth. On a budget of roughly $150 million, the film stormed past $1 billion globally within weeks. The box office analysts, stunned, tried to explain it. Was it the built-in fan base? The global reach of the game? The careful release date? All of these played their part. But beneath them was something deeper. Audiences did not come just to see pixels. They came to see meaning. They came to revisit childhood, to honor the creativity that had shaped them, to feel that their digital memories were worthy of cinematic dignity. Critics were divided. Some dismissed the film as simplistic, a novelty stretched too far. Others recognized its allegorical richness, its honesty in embracing blockiness rather than disguising it. But audiences cared less about critics than about the hum they felt inside themselves. Online forums buzzed with people saying, "It felt like home. It reminded me of building with friends. It made me cry about a blocky hut." That is box office gold not born from marketing, but from resonance. The international market amplified this. In places like Brazil, India, and China, where Minecraft had flourished as a shared digital culture, the film broke records. In Europe, critics praised its mythic undertones. In America, nostalgia fueled repeat viewings. The hive had gathered across nations, buzzing in unison, carrying the film higher than anyone expected. Looking at both the techniques and the box office, what I see is coherence. The filmmaking itself was about balance. Clear edits against chaos, warm light against shadow, hums against silence. The box office story was the same. Doubt against belief, skepticism against resonance, niche expectations against global triumph. In both cases, the hive endured. The film did not just survive. It thrived. And in thriving, it proved that even blocks can carry myth, that even pixels can hum with truth, that sometimes the simplest structures house the deepest stories. What surprised me most about Minecraft, the movie, was how alive its characters felt, even though they were made of blocks. That aliveness came, of course, from the cast. They were the voices, the gestures, the emotional anchors who transformed geometry into story. Watching the film, you may not see the full range of their expressions. Cubes don't wrinkle or weep, but you feel it in tone, in timing, in breath. It is a reminder that acting is not only in the face but in the soul, carried through every word and pause. The lead actor, chosen to embody the builder, spoke in interviews about how strange it was to act in a world that gave him so little to lean on. No costumes, no elaborate facial movements, just his voice and body caught in motion capture. You have to put your whole heart into every syllable, he said, because a block face won't save you. That honesty shows. His performance is quiet, restrained, but deeply human. He carries the humility of a man who builds not for glory, but for survival, not for conquest, but for meaning. Critics noted how his silence was as powerful as his words. He reminded audiences that sometimes the greatest strength lies in restraint. Opposite him, the warrior character was played by an actor who leaned into boldness, both on set and in interviews. He laughed often about charging into fights during Minecraft boot camp, saying it mirrored his role. "I was always the guy yelling, 'Let's fight,' even when I had no armor," he joked. On screen, that energy comes through, reckless, passionate, sometimes infuriating, but essential. He gave the film its fire, the courage that balances the builder's caution. The skeptic, another key figure, was portrayed by an actress who admitted she had never touched a game before joining the film. At first, she struggled in boot camp, often frustrated by controls, often the one to die in caves. But that frustration became fuel for her role. "I knew what it felt like to doubt, to want to quit, to feel like it was hopeless," she said. "So I played that truth." Audiences later connected with her arc, the hesitant companion who eventually trusts, who discovers that doubt can coexist with loyalty. The kidnapped friend, symbolic of innocence, was played by one of the younger cast members. In interviews, they spoke about the weight of being the one worth saving. They laughed about how strange it felt to be carried around in mocap suits, to scream while wearing pixel markers on their face. But they also admitted it gave them a strange sense of importance. "I knew if they didn't save me, the story meant nothing," they said. That self-awareness shines through on screen. Their vulnerability makes the stakes real. The villagers, though simple, were voiced by a mix of background actors, and even some children. The director revealed that he asked kids to hum and mumble into microphones, then distorted those recordings into the iconic HRMM noises. That detail, small and easy to miss, gave the villagers authenticity. It turned them from lifeless NPCs into echoes of community, ordinary voices layered into the hive. Perhaps the most fascinating casting story belongs to the voice of the Ender Dragon. The sound was not one actor, but a blend, a low bass rumble recorded by a veteran actor, mixed with animal growls and digital distortion. The actor joked in interviews, "I spent 3 hours in a booth just growling into a microphone. My grandkids will never believe me." The result is a voice both alien and human, a monster that sounds not just like chaos, but like a soul corrupted. Audience reactions added another layer. Critics were divided, but audiences filled theaters. Parents who had watched their children build blocky castles sat in awe as those castles came alive. Young adults cried when huts were destroyed, remembering the hours they had spent in their own childhood servers. Kids gasped at the Ender Dragon, while older fans whispered about how faithful the torches and sounds were. The hive of response was vast. On social media, the memes came fast. Screenshots of the creeper explosion captioned, "My childhood base in 2012. Videos of people humming the movies be sound like a chant. Fans arguing over whether a certain villager in the background was secretly Marcus Persson, the original creator. But alongside the jokes came sincerity. "I didn't think I'd cry a Minecraft movie," one fan wrote. "But when they lit that last torch, I felt like I was back with my friends after school." That is the magic of audience reviews. They are less about critique than about memory. Box office audiences became their own character. In Brazil, theaters overflowed with teenagers cheering during the dragon battle. In Japan, critics noted the mythic feel, comparing it to Shinto tales of order and chaos. In America, nostalgia ruled, with 30-year-olds reliving their digital childhoods. In India, fans connected the story to their own love of cooperative play in internet cafes. Each hive carried the film differently, but all hummed together. What strikes me is that the cast and the audience completed the same circle. The actors built a hive on set, mining, building, laughing, doubting. The audience built a hive in theaters, clapping, crying, remembering, sharing. In both cases, the film was less a product and more community. That is why the cast interviews felt so genuine, why audience reviews buzz with warmth. This was not just cinema. It was culture woven into light, sound, and memory. When the screen darkens and the final hum settles, what remains is not just the image of cubes stacked in the towers or the roar of the Ender Dragon collapsing into light. What remains is a feeling of fragility, of how delicate creation is, of how easily it can be undone, of how sacred it becomes precisely because of that fragility. Minecraft, the movie could have been just another game adaptation, disposable entertainment for a weekend. Instead, it offered us something more ancient, a parable about what it means to build, to protect, to endure. What strikes me most, looking back, is the honesty of its ending. The hive survives. The friend is rescued. The dragon is defeated. And yet nothing is solved. The cycle continues. Darkness will return. Walls will fall again. The torchlight will flicker in caves that seem endless. There is no permanent victory. And that is precisely what gives meaning to every block placed. We do not build because it will last forever. We build because it matters that we do. That truth, whispered beneath the film, echoes across myth and literature. From Sisyphus rolling a stone, to Odysseus wandering home, to us, piecing together fragile lives in a world that always threatens to unravel. The characters, too, linger like facets of ourselves. The builder, humble, placing blocks with patience. The warrior, reckless but loyal, charging into chaos. The skeptic, doubting but needed, keeping the hive from blindness. The innocent, whose vulnerability reminds us why we fight at all. And the dragon, circling forever, reminding us that chaos cannot be erased, only resisted. Each of them is us. Each of them hums within us. And together, they form a hive that reflects the human condition. From a thematic lens, the film is not about pixels. It is about fragility, guardianship, community, and resilience. It tells us that solitude is a dream, but responsibility is reality. It tells us that guardians rarely volunteer. They are chosen by necessity, by the breaking of peace. It tells us that even ruins matter, because they remind us that we are part of a cycle, not its beginning or end. And it tells us that the hive only survives if someone is willing to sacrifice stillness for action, peace for burden. These are not just game lessons. They are life lessons. Even the craft reinforces this truth. The lighting that made torches glow like fragile grace. The sound that wove the hiss of monsters and the hum of bees into atmosphere. The editing that let us feel the weight of a hut destroyed. The clarity of blocks placed in defiance. The box office story, too, mirrors it. Expectations of collapse transformed into triumph. Fragility of trust reborn as resilience. The film itself became a hive. Threatened, doubted, mocked, but defended, endured, and finally celebrated. And then there's us, the audience. We who once sat at computers placing digital blocks. We who remember the thrill of survival mode, the joy of building castles with friends, the heartbreak of losing everything to one careless moment. For us, this movie was more than cinema. It was memory given dignity. It told us our play was myth, our nostalgia was culture, our hours spent mining and crafting were worthy of parable. The hive was not only on screen. It was in the theaters, in the communities online, in the shared hum of people across generations who felt seen. So where does this leave us? Perhaps with questions rather than answers. Who are our builders today? Who are our warriors? Who are our skeptics? Our innocents, our guardians? Who are the dragons we face, circling endlessly, reminding us of entropy? And above all, are we willing to keep building, knowing the walls may fall, knowing the torchlight may flicker, knowing that fragility is part of the truth? The film doesn't solve these questions. It leaves them humming inside us, like bees in the background of thought. In the end, Minecraft, the movie is not about a game. It is about us. It is about the fragile beauty of creation, the inevitability of destruction, an eternal call to rebuild anyway. It is about hives and guardians, ruins and resilience, silence and hum. It is about the holiness of small acts, one block placed, one torch lit, one hive defended. And in reminding us of that holiness, it transcends its origins. It becomes less a film and more a fable, less a story and more a mirror. And so, as we close this journey together, I want to thank you, my companions in Cinema Vault, my fellow lovers of story and symbol, for walking through this hive with me. Thank you for listening to The Hum Beneath the Pixels, for treating a game adaptation not as disposable but as myth worth reading. If you found resonance here, if you felt the sting of fragility or the sweetness of resilience, I invite you to stay, to subscribe, to keep buzzing with us. Because our hive, too, is fragile, and it will survive only if we build it together. The screen is dark now. The dragon has fallen. The sun rises again, blocky and golden. The hive endures. And somewhere, quietly, a builder places the next block.